Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get started with Week 33's Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, this series I've been taking a close look at the words that come up during my Third Age Thursday readings from Cirion and Eorl in Unfinished Tales. Last week, we did a deep dive into the Quenya from Cirion's Oath. That was fantastic. And of course, I will take any excuse I can to read Quenya. Today, though, we're going to do something I hinted at last Third Age Thursday. We're going to look at the name that the people of the éotheod took for the country of Calanarthon and the name they took for themselves, Rohan and the Rohirrim. Now, most of what I'll be talking about, if not all, come to think of it, comes from a footnote to the very last part of the text from last week. That's when I read, the Sindarin names Rohan for the mark and Rohirrim for the people were devised first by Halas, son and successor of Cirion, but were often used not only in Gondor, but by the éotheod themselves. The footnote to that passage explains, their proper form was Rochand and Rohirrim, and they were spelt as Rochand, R-O-C-H-A-N-D, or Rochan, R-O-C-H-A-N, and Rohirrim in the records of Gondor. They contain Sindarin Roch, horse, translating the Eo in éotheod and in many personal names of the Rohirrim. The footnote then points us to another footnote about those éowords, mostly éored, which we'll get to in this Word Nerd Wednesday if there's time. But back to the other footnote, though. In Rochand, the Sindarin ending nd, so and, ond, was added. It was commonly used in the names of regions or countries, but the d was usually dropped in speech, especially in long names such as Calanarthon, Ithilien, Lamadon, etc. Rohirrim was modeled on éoherë, the term used by the éotheod for the full muster of their cavalry in time of war. It was made from roch, which we said earlier means horse, and Sindarin hir, meaning lord or master, and the note says that it's entirely unconnected with the Anglo-Saxon word éorè. In the names of peoples, Sindarin rim, great number or host, was commonly used to form collective plurals, as in Eorethrim, all elves, Onodrim, the Ent folk, Nogothrim, all dwarves or the dwarf people. Of course, that's literally the stunted people. The note continues, the language of the Rohirrim contained the sound here represented by ch, and though it was infrequent in the middle of words between vowels, it presented them with no difficulty. I wish that were the case for me. Anyway, the note continues, but the common speech did not possess it, and in pronouncing Sindarin, in which it was very frequent, the people of Gondor, unless learned, represented it by h in the middle of words and by k at the end of them, where it was most forcibly pronounced in correct Sindarin. Thus arose the names Rohan and Rohirrim as used in The Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure I can add a lot to that. It's pretty clear that the proper Sindarin forms of Rochand and Rohirrim were tricky for the people of Gondor, not to mention me, though the Rohirrim themselves had no trouble with them. And that's how we get Rohan and Rohirrim, meaning horseland and the people of the horse lords. It does make me wonder, though, would Aragorn, who was certainly learned and could speak Sindarin perfectly fine, pronounce it as Rohan? And what about the Rohirrim themselves? Would some or all of them still refer to themselves as the Rohirrim instead, since that ch sound isn't a problem for them? I don't know. There's certainly no evidence of that. Now, I think there is a little bit of time, so let's go ahead and take a look at that other footnote that was referenced. It's the one talking about the éowords. It's attached to the first mention of the word éored, and so it starts there, explaining, according to a note on the ordering of the Rohirrim, the éored had no precisely fixed number, but in Rohan it was only applied to riders fully trained for war, men serving for a term, or in some cases permanently, in the king's host. Any considerable body of such men, riding as a unit in exercise or on service, was called an éored. But after the recovery of the Rohirrim and the reorganization of their forces in the days of King Folquina, 100 years before the War of the Ring, a full éored in battle order was reckoned to contain not less than 120 men, including the captain, and to be 100th part of the full muster of the riders of the mark, not including those of the king's household. Now, the note goes on to explain that the éoreds spotted by the three hunters in The Lord of the Rings had originally contained 120. Legolas had counted them after all, saying, "There are 105. Yellow is their hair and bright are their spears." He then saw that there were 3 empty saddles. Later, Éomer tells Aragorn, 15 of my men I lost, and 12 horses, alas. So, yep, a perfect 120. Now, of course, the idea that an éored was only 1% of the full muster, that 12,000 men would ride forth, was a nice idea. But just that, the note explains. No such host, of course, had ever ridden all together to war beyond the mark. But Theoden's claim that he might, in this great peril, have led out an expedition of 10,000 riders was no doubt justified. Now, going back to the éowords, the note explains that the full muster of the cavalry was called éoherë, and then it references the first note that we looked at. These words, and also éotheod, are of course Anglo-Saxon in form, since the true language of Rohan is everywhere thus translated. They contain as their first element éo, horse. Éored, éorod, is a recorded Anglo-Saxon word. Its second element derived from rad, riding. In éoherë, the second element is herë, host or army. Éotheod has theod, people or land, and is used both of the riders themselves and of their country. And finally, the note explains that the éo in Eorl's name is a wholly unrelated word. And folks, that's it for today's Word Nerd Wednesday. But come back next time as we wander the wide, wild, wonderful world of words weekly on Wednesdays. And if there's a word you want to know more about, please let me know by emailing barnabas@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Third Age Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill by now. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.